Chronicon Mundi.
Dive deep into history.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take history's defining figures, strip away the legends, and really dissect the hard-earned skills and formative decisions that paved their way to greatness. Today, we are opening the files on James Cook.
We are, and we are deliberately avoiding, the familiar tropical islands, the dramatic encounters, all of that. Our focus is on the infrastructure, the foundation, the pure distilled professional resume of James Cook, the man, the navigator, the cartographer, right up to that critical moment in 1768.
Right. This is the mission for this deep dive. We're tracing how a farm boy from Yorkshire acquired the sheer technical competence, the formidable reputation needed to be entrusted with not just one, but 3 world-changing voyages. We're looking at his origins, his often overlooked naval service during the heat of the 7 Years' War, and the scientific recognition that really launched him onto the global stage.
Mm-hmm. If you want to understand how a man of, let's be honest, a humble background gets to command a scientific expedition halfway around the planet, you have to dissect this formative period. It's a story of choice, of calculated risk, and just relentless expertise acquisition.
And maybe the most fascinating choice comes right at the beginning of his adult life. It's a real paradox. Cook was already an incredibly successful commercial seaman in the 1750s. The sources say he was so good that he was offered his own command in the very lucrative commercial trade in 1755. And yet he made the rather surprising decision to voluntarily transfer into the Royal Navy.
That decision is the hinge.
Yeah.
It's the point upon which the rest of his history turns. You have to understand what he gave up. The commercial trade hauling coal, timber, whatever, it was incredibly profitable. Command meant wealth. It meant comfort, independence. Choosing the Navy meant abandoning all of that security for the rigid, competitive, and honestly often utterly brutal structure of military hierarchy. He gave up guaranteed income for a chance to fight for status.
So why do that? Why trade certain wealth for this uncertain advancement in a massive, massive bureaucracy?
Because the Royal Navy, especially during wartime, it operated on a far clearer, albeit brutal, form of meritocracy than the commercial sector. In the commercial world, advancement could often hinge on, family connections, nepotism, or just your ability to buy shares in a vessel. Cook, as an older, experienced, and highly skilled seaman, he was 27 when he joined, he saw a pathway to higher command based purely on demonstrated competence.
So he was already a master mariner. The Navy offered him a chance to, sort of leapfrog the typical chain of command that younger, maybe better connected officers had to follow.
Precisely. They needed competent navigators immediately, right then,
yeah,
to support the massive fleet expansion required for the impending global conflict. Cook's civilian experience was his golden ticket. He traded that commercial stability for a chance at a high-level professional advancement that his background otherwise would have, completely precluded. That singular decision is the foundation of his entire career.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very start because the foundation is just so essential. So, Section 2, the Yorkshireman and the coal trade. You genuinely cannot get more grounded in 18th century working life than James Cook's origins.
Oh, it's a true rags to respectability story. Even if respectability was still, working class. Cook was born on October 27, 1728, in Marton in Cleveland, Yorkshire. His parents were described as humble. His father began as a day laborer, a man who worked for daily wages, totally unstable employment, but he showed initiative. He eventually rose to become a farm foreman at Great Ayton. That small upward trajectory, it speaks volumes about the family ambition.
And crucially, this wasn't a man who rose from complete illiteracy. He had access to a basic education, which in the 18th century, especially in rural areas, was just not a guarantee.
No, it wasn't. He received an education at the village school. That baseline level of numeracy and literacy, you combine that with a clear natural aptitude for mathematics, and it gave him the intellectual tools he would need later to master navigation and astronomical calculations. We can even trace the physical history of his family through architecture. His father built a modest structure in 1755, which became famous as Cook's Cottage.
Which is a fun historical footnote, right? Given that the cottage itself was later meticulously disassembled, shipped across the world, and then reassembled in Melbourne, Australia, it just speaks to the iconic status the family name gained long after they had left Yorkshire.
It does. But before the global icon, there was the local craftsman. The real, indispensable training began at age 17. This is where he learned the specific, practical seamanship that defined his life, the Whitby apprenticeship.
We need to spend some time here because this really defines the type of captain he would become. What was the Whitby apprenticeship like?
So at 17, Cook became an apprentice to a man named John Walker, a Quaker ship owner and coal shipper in Whitby. He spent 9 years, almost a decade, sailing along the harsh, dangerous east coast of England in the coal trade. This period instilled the kind of robust, practical knowledge that, no amount of theoretical book learning could ever provide.
And the type of ship he trained on, the collier, that's not just some interesting detail, is it? It's arguably the single most important technical detail of his entire career.
Absolutely vital, yes. He sailed in what were known as broad-bottomed or cat-built colliers. We really need to pause and explain what that means, because this ship design is the unsung hero of Cook's Pacific voyages.
Please, go on. Why were these ships so important?
Well, colliers were utility vehicles. They were designed not for speed, not for military elegance, but for robustness and sheer carrying capacity. They had broad, flat bottoms, that's the broad bottom part, and a shallow draft. This meant they could haul these heavy loads of coal into shallow harbors along the coast, often navigating rivers and estuaries that deeper naval vessels just couldn't approach.
So they were kind of the SUV of the sea. Tough, reliable, and able to get into tricky places.
Exactly. And because of their robust construction, their ability to just take a beating and that shallow draft, they became the perfect exploration vessels. When the Admiralty later needed a ship capable of crossing vast, uncharted oceans, surviving unexpected coral reefs, and being repaired without a proper dockyard, which is precisely what Cook needed in the Pacific, what did they choose? A converted Whitby collier.
Like the Endeavour, which was a collier named the Earl of Pembroke before they converted it. So that familiarity meant Cook didn't just command a ship. He understood the vessel's limitations and strengths from the keel up. He knew exactly what it could endure when it was, say, scraping against an Australian reef.
That practical knowledge is reflected much later in his own self-assessment, that of a man who was constantly at sea from his youth. That decade of service on the coal run was indispensable. It shaped his conservatism in vessel choice and his confidence in navigating dangerous, shallow waters.
Which brings us back to that 1755 career pivot. He's mastered the coal trade, he's got a lucrative command on the table, and he chooses the Navy. What was the mechanism for his rapid ascent there?
The mechanism was the urgent need for masters. The master in the Royal Navy was the chief navigating officer. While the captain was the commander, the policymaker, the master was the technical expert. He was responsible for sailing the ship, charting the course, handling the rigging, ensuring navigational accuracy. They required immense demonstrated skill.
And Cook, he joins as an able seaman and then just shoots through the ranks.
Incredibly quickly. Within weeks, he was a master's mate, and within 2 years, by 1757, he had achieved the rank of masters. This lightning-fast promotion just confirms that the Navy valued immediate, specialized competence over pure social standing, especially in the technical ranks. For Cook, it was the perfect vehicle for social mobility. The Navy gave him the structure to utilize his skills on a scale the commercial trade just couldn't offer.
So by 1757, he's established as master, the primary navigator. Now we enter Section 3, cartography and conflict. This is the crucible of the 7 Years' War, which ran from 1756 to 1763. And this is where he moves from being a competent seaman to a nationally recognized surveyor.
Yes, the wartime environment was unforgiving, but it provided the ultimate training ground. Cook served as master on the HMS Pembroke and then the HMS Northumberland. His service placed him directly in the critical theaters of the French War, most notably in North America.
And specifically in the St. Lawrence River, during the run-up to the pivotal siege of Quebec in 1759, this is where his mathematical skills were, truly weaponized.
Charting the St. Lawrence is a huge testament to his abilities. It is a highly complex, dangerous, and lengthy waterway, and to attempt to chart it with precision during the war, often within range of French shore batteries, that demonstrated a rare combination of cool-headedness and meticulous scientific accuracy.
I think we need to emphasize just how hard this charting process was. It wasn't just drawing lines on a piece of paper. What kind of specialized knowledge was required to map that river under duress?
It required total mastery of nautical surveying. Most navigators of the era were still relying heavily on dead reckoning, estimating position based on course, speed, and time. Cook was using sophisticated triangulation, astronomical observations, and geometry to fix positions and map coastlines with a precision that was, up to then, usually reserved for land surveys.
And the St. Lawrence itself is a navigational nightmare, even without people shooting at you.
It absolutely is. You have massive tidal fluctuations. You've got often shifting sandbars and shoals that appear and disappear with the tide, and extremely heavy fog, which is a killer for any large vessel. Cook's charts were instrumental in guiding the British fleet upriver to attack Quebec. Without his meticulously created accurate maps, General Wolfe's assault likely would have failed due to grounding or some other navigational error.
So he wasn't just mapping, he was directly contributing to a major military victory. This act transformed his reputation from good master to formidable surveyor.
It did. The sources refer to him as being recognized as a good mathematician and a skilled navigator before this. But the St. Lawrence work was proof positive. It showed that he could perform under continuous life-or-death pressure, delivering charts of such fidelity that the Admiralty was willing to stake their entire military campaign on them. This gave them total confidence that he could handle the extreme unknowns of the Pacific.
And that sets the stage for the next phase, which really cemented his place in the scientific community. So that takes us to Section 4, Newfoundland. This is the apex of his pre-voyage achievement, spanning the years 1764 to 1768.
After the war ended, the Admiralty didn't let that talent sit idle. Cook was immediately engaged in a prolonged naval survey of Newfoundland, specifically mapping large sections of the coast that were still very poorly known.
So this wasn't a rush job during a siege. This was a dedicated, multi-year scientific mandate.
Correct. And the quality of the work speaks for itself. His maps were published and were recognized as being of such accuracy that they remained the standard nautical reference for navigation in that region for decades. This wasn't just practical sailing. This was defining modern geography for a crucial part of the British North Atlantic Empire.
This is also where he truly bridges that gap between being a naval officer and a recognized scientist, and he starts catching the attention of the Royal Society.
The Royal Society was the epicenter of British scientific endeavor. They were focused on improving knowledge through rigorous observation, and Cook provided them with two key pieces of work during his Newfoundland tenure. First, he performed these rigorous calculations of longitude. Second, he made accurate observations of a solar eclipse.
That detail about the longitude calculations, it's so central to the 18th century world. We talk about it often, but we should really hammer home why solving the longitude problem was so important.
It was the single greatest navigational crisis of the age. For centuries, sailors could determine their latitude, their north-south position easily using the sun or the North Star. But determining longitude, your east-west position, that required accurate timekeeping, which was impossible before marine chronometers, or these highly complex astronomical calculations.
And the tragic consequences of failing to do this. You only have to look at the Scilly Isles naval disaster in 1707.
Precisely. That catastrophe resulted in the sinking of 4 warships, the loss of 1,550 lives, all because the fleet failed to accurately calculate their position and struck the rocks. The British government later offered this massive financial prize for a solution. Cook, rather than waiting for technology like John Harrison's chronometer, which he would use later, he mastered the manual astronomical method, the lunar distance method, or lunars.
And using lunars meant measuring the angle between the moon and certain stars, and then performing these immense calculations to figure out the time at Greenwich, and from that, your longitude. It was staggeringly difficult. It required a mathematical expertise few seamen possessed.
And that is why the Royal Society was so impressed. Cook wasn't just good at plotting. He was performing advanced mathematics in the field, submitting observations that passed the scrutiny of the era's leading astronomers. When his findings were communicated to the Royal Society, specifically his solar eclipse observations, and then published in the Philosophical Transactions, it certified his mathematical proficiency on an international stage.
So it's no longer just the Navy saying he's good. Now the scientists are saying he is a brilliant observer and mathematician, capable of contributing to the most complex celestial physics of the era. And that certification is absolutely necessary for the mission that comes next.
It is the ultimate stamp of approval. And yet, amidst all the scientific rigor, we get those little colorful anecdotes that remind us that Cook was still a working man, exposed to immense physical danger.
The anecdote about the scar, we have to flesh that out. It really humanizes the precision of the scientist.
Indeed. It was on August 6, 1764, off Newfoundland, that Cook was injured. He was directing operations when a powder magazine exploded. It was a serious, dramatic incident, and he received a distinctive scar running from his thumb to his forefinger.
A constant physical mark of his service that day.
And it links this Newfoundland service directly to the end of his life. That specific scar was recorded and later used to assist in identifying his remains after his death in 1779. It demonstrates how lasting the impact of this period of intense physical and intellectual service really was. The man was brilliant, yes, but he was also rugged and constantly in harm's way.
That's a powerful detail. So he survived wartime surveying, he survived explosions, and now he has the scientific publications. But in the 18th century Navy, even genius needed a champion, right? Who was his advocate in that final push for recognition just before 1768?
That role belonged to Captain Lord Colville, who had been his superior officer aboard the Northumberland. Colville understood that Cook was not just competent, he possessed exceptional potential. He recognized that if Cook remained a master, his talent would basically be wasted.
So if the Navy was truly meritocratic, why did he need an influential champion like Colville? I mean, doesn't that suggest the old boy network was still pretty essential for rising above the rank of master?
That's a very astute point. Meritocracy gets you to the rank of master, which is a technical rank. But to get a commission, to get command of a ship, which is a social and political rank, you absolutely needed a high-level patron. Colville's intervention was necessary to translate Cook's proven merit into social capital.
And Colville's formal endorsement to the Lords of the Admiralty is essentially the official sign-off on his fitness for command. It's like a final, high-level job interview recommendation.
And the wording of that letter is priceless. Colville wrote to the Admiralty on December 30, right at the cusp of the new year, stating, "From my experience of Mr. Cook's genius and capacity, I think him well qualified for the work he had performed and for greater undertakings of the same kind."
Genius and capacity. Wow. That is not the language you use for a merely competent navigator. That is high praise that must have turned heads at the Admiralty.
It confirms his readiness. It signals that the top brass recognized they didn't just have a highly technical master, but a man of exceptional intellect and navigational skill, who was suited for missions that went far beyond typical naval duties. This was the moment his resume was fully completed and endorsed for global exploration.
So this brings us to Section 5, Synthesis and Readiness for the World Stage. If we look at the composite profile of the man they selected in 1768, he was just a singular figure, built piece by piece from his humble roots.
Absolutely. We can summarize the four sort of pillars of qualification that Cook had painstakingly accumulated by his late 30s.
Okay, first, the practical foundation. The knowledge of ship durability, thanks to his 9 years sailing those robust, shallow-draft Whitby colliers. He knew exactly what kind of vessel could take a sustained beating in dangerous waters.
Second, the leadership and management structure gained in the Navy. His rapid ascent to master proved his ability to lead, to command respect, and to manage the complexity of a ship's crew, even under the intense pressure of wartime. That includes managing the navigation staff and making sure the vessel was seaworthy.
Third, the advanced scientific credibility. His accurate longitude calculations and observations of the solar eclipse, validated by the Royal Society, gave him undeniable standing with the civilian scientists who would accompany the mission, like, the young botanist Joseph Banks, who wielded significant influence.
And fourth, the proven cartographic precision. Develops under intense military pressure in the St. Lawrence River, and then rigorously, scientifically applied in the Newfoundland surveys. He didn't just map, he created definitive charts that redefined navigational standards. He was the pioneer in accuracy.
So, by 1768, James Cook possessed precisely the combination of practical, military, and scientific skills that the Admiralty and the Royal Society needed. They needed a seaman who could survive the Pacific, a surveyor who could chart the unknown, and a mathematician who could perform the astronomical work.
And that upcoming venture was monumental. The voyage to observe the transit of Venus in Tahiti, scheduled for June 1769.
Let's spend a moment on the scientific magnitude of this transit of Venus. This wasn't just some nice-to-have astronomical event. Why was the world mobilizing for this observation?
The transit of Venus, where Venus passes directly between the Sun and Earth, is rare. It was predicted by Edmund Halley way back in 1716. The observations, when you perform them simultaneously from multiple, widely spaced points on Earth, allowed astronomers to apply triangulation to calculate the solar parallax.
And what does calculating the solar parallax give you?
It allows you to accurately determine the distance between the Earth and the Sun. And if you know that distance, you can, through Kepler's laws, accurately calculate the distance of every other planet in the solar system. In essence, this observation was the key to determining the scale, the precise size of our entire solar system.
So Cook wasn't just being hired to sail to a remote island. He was the facilitator of a fundamental scientific endeavor, an international effort to define the geometry of the cosmos. And that fragile scientific equipment and those essential observers needed a commander who was utterly reliable.
His reputation for mathematical exactitude made him the only logical choice. They couldn't afford a captain who might make a 2-degree error in a celestial observation, or a captain who couldn't keep his ship afloat long enough to even reach the remote location. Cook had demonstrated mastery over every single variable: celestial, cartographic, and practical seamanship.
It is truly staggering to realize that the man entrusted with defining the size of the solar system was less than a decade removed from hauling coal off the coast of Yorkshire. The stage was set for him to move from a respected naval surveyor to a legendary world explorer.
And the fact that the Admiralty repurposed a collier, the endeavor for this mission, serves as a permanent architectural reminder of his origins. They trusted the ship design that he had sailed for 9 years, knowing its resilience would be the difference between success and disaster in the South Pacific. His past was literally sailing with him.
This transformation, this journey from a farm laborer's hut to command of a scientific vessel for a global mission, is what makes his early history so essential for understanding the man. It wasn't luck. It was rigorous professional development.
It was a carefully built resume of technical competence and proven resilience, achieved not through inherited wealth or social standing, but through merit and sheer hard work.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, looking at James Cook's pre-1768 life? What is the ultimate takeaway from this foundational period?
It is this. Cook's career was a testament to deliberate specialization. He spent his youth mastering the most practical, robust aspects of seamanship in the coal trade. He then made a calculated, risky career change to deliberately seek out a meritocratic path in the Navy, where he specialized in the highest form of naval science-accurate surveying and navigation under duress. He actively positioned himself to be the perfect, uniquely qualified candidate for the job the world needed doing in 1768.
He went through the war, survived an exploding powder magazine, and published his scientific observations all before he turned 40. He didn't wait for opportunity. He engineered the specific skill set required to seize it when it arrived.
And to leave you with a final provocative thought, let's reconsider Cook's own self-assessment much later in life. He wrote that his journal was written by, and I quote, "a man who has not the advantage of education acquired, nor natural abilities for writing, but by one who has been constantly at sea from his youth."
Yeah, he consistently presents himself as a simple, uneducated seaman, a man of action, not a man of letters.
So, given the accolades from the Royal Society for his astronomical and mathematical work, given the sophistication of the charts he produced, and the high-level trust placed in him by the Admiralty, how much did Cook genuinely underestimate his own natural abilities? Was this profound humility real, or was it a calculated, heroic self-effacement? The Yorkshire farm boy remaining publicly grounded, suggesting a political and reflective sophistication that his taciturn portraits rarely capture. It's a question of whether his greatest skill was navigation or understanding how to present his genius to the world.